So the first project we're gonna do, I'm actually already halfway through, is this one. This used to be an antique desk that we're converting into a daybed. So this is what the antique desk looked like when we got it. I lowered one edge, added 3 support wood beams for the base. I glued 2x2 on the front edge, and this is where the slats would rest. And then after laying out the slats, I had to work on the backrest, which is made from this old Nara room divider that I had to cut in half. And that's basically where we left off on the video. But yeah, so we'll finish this up. I just need to put this part of the backrest on, wax all of this, and should be more or less done. So let's get to it. So by this time I had been working on this project for maybe 6 or 7 weekends already. And here I really wanted to take my time, because when you're working with a beautiful piece like this, you want to make sure you measure 3, 4, 5 times before you make the first cut. And I was really learning as I was going. So here you'll see I started with a hacksaw, thinking that that would create my guide to do the cuts, and then I could shift to a coping saw. But I quickly realized that I couldn't go all the way with it and it was going too slow, so I shifted to a jigsaw, which worked really well for the frame but wasn't working quite well with the pattern itself, and I was afraid that I would get too much chip out, so I went back to the coping saw. But I knew that I wouldn't be able to get all the way through, so in a few seconds here you're going to see I shifted to this knife type of saw. I don't know what it's called, but that one worked really well. But then I realized that if I kept going like this, I could tear off a piece of the pattern once it fell off. So I had to put a table to support the other side, and then I finished off the cut. And I think the cut came out pretty straight and pretty clean. So here I'm just measuring which part of the frame, actually I need to cut the frame shorter. So which part of the frame I had to cut. I drew some lines on it, went back to the coping saw, went back to the knife type of saw, and again that worked really well. I don't know why I didn't use the jigsaw right away, because you'll see here in a few seconds that I go from coping to the knife type and then back to the jigsaw. But either way, it worked out well. It was a clean cut, didn't have to do any sanding at all, so it turned out nice. The next thing I had to do after that was cut a rabbet at the bottom of the frame, but when I tried to fit both sides it wouldn't fit, so I had to widen the center pillar. I had to widen the dado. I tried the chisel, I tried a file, that didn't work, so I had to go to my router to try and do it. So all I want to show here is you need to make sure that that router bit just clears it. I actually forgot to time-lapse this part of the video, and that's why it's showing in real time. But basically what I'm doing here is I'm just trying to router the edges so that it's nice and smooth and flat and exactly at the right width for the pattern to fit through. And I did it for both sides. And once that was settled, I could work on the rabbet for the frame, for the bottom of the frame. I put everything back together, I draw a line where I need to cut the rabbet, and I proceed to set up for the rabbet cut. Now the setup time for this took quite a bit, but it's worth it. You know, you really have to be careful when you make a cut like this, because you only really get one shot at it. So here I'm showing how far deep I gotta go. And once that's good, I check the other side of the frame, check the depth, want to make sure that the depth is the same. So I need to set the blade height. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm setting the blade to the right height. And once that's all done, you just run it through and cut. And once that's done, you just do it all over again, but this time you do it on the other side, setting the blade height the right height, setting the depth the right depth, and that's pretty much all there is to it. Now you'll notice when the cut is being made that there's a lot of smoke. Now you maybe, I don't know, maybe my blade is dull. No, for sure my blade is dull, or maybe I'm not even using the right blade and I need to get a new 7.5 inch blade. But if you have a good circular saw, it shouldn't smoke up like that. So it's time for a trip to the hardware and replace my blades, I guess. I actually didn't realize my fingers were so close to the blade until I watched this video, so I need to be more careful when I do that. So anyway, once that's done, you can pretty much snap that piece off, but there's some wood that's left, so I had to work it with a chisel and hammer and try to get the inside corner as straight as possible, or as square as possible. Once that was done, I went back and I proceeded to do a dry fit just to make sure that everything was nice and snug and fit just right. Fortunately it did, and once that was settled, I took it back down and it was time to glue it all together. Now I wanted to include in the video a mistake I made here. So after I take this down, you'll notice that I start gluing it up from the sides, which I realized was causing a lot of bleed out. So after I realized that, I took it apart, got a rag and started removing as much of the glue as I could, and then I started gluing it from the bottom. So actually the plan at this point was to glue everything together, clamp it down, give it a few hours to dry, and once it was dry, mount it onto the daybed. But I was worried that if I did that if I didn't put them together the right way, that when it was time to mount, that it wouldn't fit right, and it would be very hard to move this if the glue had already dried. So as I was doing this, I was thinking, well, maybe while the glue is wet, I should try and mount it already. And eventually, when I get these two sides together, I make the decision that it's probably best to just mount it already. So a few minutes after I finish this part of the video, I start gluing up the daybed. I start gluing up the frame to the daybed. I knew that I was going to mount this backrest to the frame of the daybed with some screws and dowels, so I didn't want to use too much glue. So you'll notice that I'm using quite a bit, but I'm not really slathering it on, because I just wanted to make sure that it would adhere to the frame. It's a good thing too that I decided to mount it on the daybed while the glue was still a bit wet, because it was not a perfect fit and I had to sort of shimmy it and convince it to go in the way it was supposed to when I had dry fitted. So what I'm doing here now is I'm clamping the top of the frame to the base of the I don't know what that's called, but I'm clamping it together so that it sticks, and I'm clamping the bottom so that that part sticks. And then this is what I had planned, was to really just screw it in, and I made sure to countersink so that it didn't protrude from the back. Now this is the only part of the daybed that I actually use screws, and that's because it wouldn't be seen because it was in the back. On the top part, and to secure the top part to the backrest, I use wooden dowels, and you just saw there that I used masking tape as a depth guide. And I hammer it through. I use the coping saw to remove the excess, and I sand it down. And I did that 8 times across. Here's a neat trick I saw on YouTube, which is instead of using a hammer, you use a clamp to force it down. I just wanted to share that. no woodworking project is ever without any mistakes. So here's one I made, and fortunately I was taking the video in real time at the time, and you'll see what I did in a minute. Yeah, that's a big problem. So at that point I actually paused the camera and stared at my mistake for a few minutes and panicked, but I figured, you know, a little bit of glue, clamp it up, and everything should be okay. I knew I had to do this, but I was really dreading it. But it was time to clean the pattern as much as I could, so I mixed some soap and some water, and I just brushed it down and rubbed it down. And here at this part I was getting ready to apply the wax, and I realized that this part here I had forgotten to attach it somehow to the base. And because the wooden dowels worked so well on the backrest, I figured I'll do it with this one. I also thought, hey, what a great chance to try this other trick I saw, which was to use soap or wax to put a dowel through, and it worked really well actually. But because this piece had a slight bow on it, I thought, well, maybe I should be using wood glue so that it doesn't shift or move over time. So the next 7 or 5 pieces I started using glue for that. Now I had put 4 dowels across on the backrest, and I thought that I should do I did 8 dowels across on the backrest, and I thought I should do 8 dowels across on this one. But you'll see there, right in the middle, there's no room for the 4th dowel, at least not if I wanted it aligned with the backrest dowels. I didn't realize that until it was too late, so I had already made the pilot hole when I realized it, and I patched it up with some sawdust and sandpapered it, tried my best to cover it up. But again, you know, no woodworking project ever gets completed without a few mistakes. So I finally get to start to wax this thing, and this is really my favorite part because the wood really starts to show its true character, and there's a real sense of achievement when you start to apply the finish. So I have to say that this is my favorite part of any project, is applying the finish. I knew I needed backup when I started to work on the diamond pattern on the backrest. So I asked for some backup, and my wife was kind enough to help me. So in a few seconds here she should come into the frame, and she did a great job. I mean, it looks so much better after she worked on it, and I'm so glad she helped me out on it, because I don't think I would have done as good a job with it. So here she is working her magic, and kudos to my wife. The project would not have turned out as good as it did without her. And it looks like I'm helping, but really I didn't. So once that was done, that was pretty much it. We've got a brand new daybed. We just need to order the foam, and that's it. So thanks for watching, and see you at the next one.